Hello, everyone, and welcome to a Merlin the Mighty review. This is going to be hopefully a fairly quick one because I actually have to be heading out soon. Though there'll be another quick video probably uploaded within the next day or two as well. Excuse me. This first video here today will be a film review of the movie I just watched, The Many Saints of Newark. I watched it last night, aka the Sopranos movie, and I just wanted to give my thoughts on it and probably go into a few spoilers because I really wanted to review the movie immediately after I watched it, but I was just way too tired. I'd been up really long time and decided to do a double feature. So yeah, just didn't have the energy to put my thoughts out. So here we are today with a little more energy to conduct this review. So I know on my channel, obviously, a lot of you probably know that I'm a pretty big movie guy, and there's been a lot of focus on Merlin the Mighty regarding, obviously comic books, anime, and sometimes just a lot of sci-fi, horror, action stuff. So it tends to be where I gravitate, but some of you may not know that I'm also a pretty big fan of just gangster cinema, mafia movies, things like that, and The Sopranos is one of my favorite. It's probably my favorite TV show of all time, and I also think it's just easily one of the best, maybe the best. It's changed the game in so many ways, and it's just incredibly well done. I've been rewatching it in preparation for the show. I'm not quite through season one yet, but that was kind of the era sort of most connected to this movie. So season one and two. So yeah, I've just been kind of going back to it, I think for the third or fourth time running through it, and it's still so good just in terms of the acting and writing it's and the cinematography, a lot of the editing, just making TV more cinematic and kind of upping the level of quality, really just being in its own right just as a piece of art and entertainment. I think it sort of stands alone among or really just among some of the best. I mean, I could go off about that. That's probably a separate video, but basically that's a little bit of context. Basically, I really like The Sopranos, and I was anticipating this because the creator, David Chase, was behind it, and also the person who is playing young Tony Soprano in the film is actually the son of the actor, the late James Gandolfini, who was great. So I thought that was really cool. There was a really personal connection, and I probably a lot of focus on trying to really bring that performance to life as much as he could from a younger perspective. So I could tell this was probably going to be a labor of love with a lot of the people originally involved, I think, behind it, at least some of the main showrunners. So, all right. So, yeah, I guess the main question to get out of the way is, which I was talking to my friend Dan. We also, if you're interested in checking out more videos about Sopranos, a couple of years ago, about 5, 6 years ago now, I actually ran through Sopranos again, season by season, with my friend Dan, and kind of got him into it, and it was really cool to see his perspective from a fresh view. So, if you want to check out more of my thoughts on that, there was actually some other videos you can check out in a playlist. Also check out his channel, Dan Reviews It, of course. Uh, but I was talking with him about, and his first question was basically, does this movie work as a standalone film? Because I think that's the mark of a great film too, and it doesn't necessarily always have to be that way. I think a lot of movies are um, they're complementary, but I also think that they could work as their own thing. But I guess I don't think that a movie being tailored to a specific audience and having, if it's based on a show, having needed to see the show is necessarily a negative. I think that that's not necessarily a thing. It's just a matter of how it's being portrayed. I think it's definitely a good thing if you want to hook people in. Say, okay, here's this thing that's got to bring in more of an audience. So maybe it's more efficient, but I don't know if it necessarily makes it less of a movie. Just getting that idea out of the way. Like for instance, I was kind of thinking of this film a lot like the uh, El Camino, the Breaking Bad movie, which is this is I think maybe where it got the inspiration because that's kind of a sequel, which is just tying up the Jesse Pinkman stuff. Which watching it, I definitely think that watching Breaking Bad would definitely enhance it. I almost want to say it's necessary, but they show you enough that you don't have to have really any knowledge. It is just a very good movie on its own. So I think that's similar, but other examples I could think of are, I mean, obviously Serenity. I thought watching it for the first time, it stood alone pretty well as a movie, but it is also very much a sequel to Firefly. Like, not as necessary, but definitely would help. I think much more so. I think that's more a sequel. Maybe a bigger example I can think of, maybe that you definitely need to watch something. A lot of, like for instance, anime movies like the end of Evangelion is really kind of the ending or one ending of the show that you really should probably have watched the show beforehand or from the first Fullmetal Alchemist series, the Conquer of the Shambhala. You'd probably be really confused if you didn't watch the show. It's basically one big long last episode. Anyway, enough of a tangent there for context. The movie. See, this wasn't going to be that quick. All right. To answer to that first question, uh, that was actually one of my. I'm a bit conflicted because that's one of the big issues. Well, not it's not a big issue, but I'm still trying to mull over how I feel about it. So hopefully we'll get through this. As far as welcoming newcomers, no, it's not very efficient at that because there are going to be some spoilers here. So I will say that I liked it, and if you're a big Sopranos fan, you probably have watched it already. You're going to soon. I still recommend it, though it might not be what you're expecting. Um, but got to go into a little bit of spoiler here because the movie drops spoilers almost immediately with this thing that, as a Sopranos fan, and being a big fan of Michael Imperioli, who played Christopher Moltisanti, I appreciated it kind of, but I also thought it was kind of unnecessary, and it definitely alienates potential future viewers because it drops a couple big spoilers right away. It's almost like assuming things like in the trailers promoting it. Sometimes they'll have all these clips of all these big moments that have some big spoilers. But basically, Christopher is narrating from the grave as a ghost because he was kind of a storyteller, aspiring screenwriter, and he's just talking, oh, like there's young Tony. He's gonna strangle me one day. Like, oh, so now I know that Chris dies in the show, and who kills him? Like that was one big one right there, and so there's a couple little ones like that. So it was automatically I kind of liked it stylistically, but it's a little annoying. And the thing is, they don't use it that much. Like his voiceover pops up a couple times, but it's not consistently throughout the movie, really. So I have mixed feelings about that. Like I like Michael Imperioli, and it was cool to see Christopher's presence in there as well. But kind of a minor thing, but I think that automatically says, yeah, this is definitely much more a movie for Sopranos fans. It's a prequel. It's not. It's still very much its own thing, but I think you'll definitely get more out of it if you see the show first. Though I still think it's a good movie on its own. But anyway, that's probably the biggest thing I could say about this movie is it's it's more of a meditation on the Sopranos and what it was about, and it's kind of almost a microcosm of a lot of the themes of the show told in a different story with different characters because a lot of the same ideas are explored and also some other ones. I probably could go on much longer because I think that there is a lot to break down. One big thing about the movie, and I thought this was an interesting thing I read in an article, is that one of the potential weaknesses of The Sopranos, which I think it's a very good show, and this wasn't the main focus of it, so I don't think it's a huge deal. But it has been pointed out the portrayal of um, non-white characters, particularly African American characters, anybody that wasn't a member of the mafia or wasn't Italian American or just Caucasian, a lot of them tended to be kind of one-dimensional or just diminished to being kind of low-level criminals. There weren't really many fleshed out characters. I mean, I think the one that stood out to me the most that was more of a character. Well, the gangster rapper episode was an interesting one, but I think even though he was one of the better characters, he wasn't really very fleshed out for an African American character. There was one about the cop that pulls Tony over, and we kind of get some insight into his character. That was a good actor doing a good performance, but we also don't learn much about him either. So that's one thing about The Sopranos that obviously it wasn't the focus, but that was a point someone made out about it. I feel like this movie is a bit of an answer to that because another thing this movie does is it kind of takes race relations and in the 60s and 70s and kind of puts that in the context of the battle between different criminal organizations at the time, and also kind of echoes some recent issues we've had with police brutality and just racism in general, and also riots and class issues and things like that. So even though it's sort of that echo of history, that it really brings up this extreme atmosphere that really makes you feel like you're there, and makes it pop regarding the situation when those riots are happening, the late 60s, and all the tensions and kind of the seediness and the pressures and distrust between the different ethnic groups, and kind of in the small context of crime, but seeing how that is kind of echoed throughout the culture at the time. So and also how that kind of relates to issues we've had in recent years, I think is very telling as well. So it's definitely also a little bit of a commentary on race relations, but that's more of also a backdrop. And sometimes it's a focus of the story with Sopranos and mafia stuff as a backdrop. So it kind of switches a little bit. So that's one thing about it I really wanted to point out. The other thing about it that's, like I said, a little bit misleading is it's more about it's not really about Tony. I mean, we learn a little bit about Tony. We were informed about Tony, and I was thinking about it. Well, we had a whole show about him. We learned a lot about him. Now we get a little more insight, a little more context into his childhood and the people he was around and the values that he was surrounded with, and how he wasn't encouraged, how he might not have been given certain options because he didn't have a lot of compassion from his parents, maybe, or enough, which we heard a lot about, but getting to see it, it actually does kind of amp that up a little bit. And I wasn't sure at first where it was going because it was like, like I getting it, but we've seen some of these flashbacks before, kind of. So, but then it starts to get moving, and okay, there are some gut punch moments there, certainly. But really, that's the thing is that Tony Soprano, we have some scenes which definitely bring a lot of life to his character in his youth and inform it for sure. And I think the young actor does a good job. But the movie's not really about him, you know, which I and I I asked somebody else in the theater who watched it with me as well as I actually saw it with my mom, and she felt the same way. Like I came to the Sopranos movie to kind of see more Soprano stuff, and we did, but like we got the race relations thing, kind of a cultural commentary thing, with through that lens, which is cool, but not exactly what I expected. Not maybe it's what we needed, but I don't know if it's what we entirely wanted. One guy said I was expecting more shootouts and things like that, but there were some. There was a pretty intense shootout between this one this one gang with this other character Harold, but and Dickie Moltisanti, because that's who the movie's really about. It's actually about kind of this legendary figure, which I think is kind of once again a commentary on the this idealized, romanticized idea about the mafia and old values and how you kind of live up to the expectation, which is kind of one reason why it's good that Christopher's ghost is there because he. It's interesting. We get a lot about Christopher's character in a certain way too, in an ancillary kind of way, because Christopher always wanted to be in the mafia and aspired to it, but he also kind of wanted to be a screenwriter. He just wanted fame, he wanted glory, he wanted to kind of make his place essentially, but never felt like he could quite get there. And we see how the mafia in Sopranos is really, obviously much dirtier and grittier and not pretty. It's not as romanticized like The Godfather or those old gangster movies. We see a lot of that realism, but Christopher can't seem to make that click. He's still living like he's aspiring to be this famous gangster he might have seen in these old movies. And he always thought, oh, my father, Dickie Moltisanti, who was somebody who we knew helped sort of raise Tony and who Tony looked up to, which was one reason why he cared about Christopher. That really does inform that relationship too. So so see what I'm saying? We have a lot of layers here, and the interesting thing is we actually in the show. And this is also, I feel like you should watch the show first because we have sort of this legend of Dickie Moltisanti as this legendary gangster, also a great guy, apparently, like just this person that, was really looked up to by everybody. And he had a good reputation. We actually get to see the guy, and we actually learn, much like Tony Soprano, he is a very complicated person. And I think that Dickie Moltisanti is. Honestly an extremely well acted, well directed, constructed, well written character, much like a lot of the stuff surrounding him in this film, because he was so believable as a person and the complexities of a person, which is I think one of the things that Sopranos really excelled at was really the creation of the anti-hero on TV, with that episode College, when we saw we're kind of rooting and following and connecting on a certain level with somebody we know is capable of doing these really terrible things. And we're never really sure how we feel about Tony because much like any other person, he's very complicated. We can't just dismiss him as completely evil or completely good. I mean, I guess we'll lean one way or the other, and we have to say, okay, he's still a gangster and does these things, but why are we so compelled to follow him? Much like would inspire Breaking Bad with Walter White, etc. We all know that. But what I'm saying with Dickie Moltisanti, they do it again because we take this legendary figure we never heard about and we actually explore his character, and we see, well, in some ways, and this is one of the things that I wondered about is if when I after I got done with this movie, I was like, well, Who's a better person, Tony Soprano or Dickie Moltisanti? Because Tony Soprano had all kinds of issues, anger issues. He cheated on his wife. He was a gangster, did all these things. And, maybe he fell to the dark side at the end. Perhaps it's still, I guess, up to debate, but there's kind of a decline to his character. But he's always trying to do these good little things. And we see a soft side with his family, with his friends. He does have a code. And sometimes he, really does wish he was not a gangster and feels like he was sort of pushed into it by his environment, which we see he wasn't given many other options. All of his other influences were in that life. So it's like there's your choices, which they kind of talk about in the movie, the power of choice, but also your environment, nature versus nurture. It's complicated stuff, reflecting how things actually are, in people's lives. It's difficult subject matter. But anyway, this isn't going to be brief. Basically, Dickie Moltisanti, he seems in some ways like he is kind of a saint, right? Like in the title, like he wants to try and actually do really good things. He's trying to do good things for other people. He seems, as far as a gangster goes, he actually seems like a really nice guy. Like, until I realized that he was around these people and occasionally doing certain things, sometimes I almost forgot he was a gangster because he just doesn't seem like it. But but then he does a couple things that I would argue maybe are worse than anything Tony Soprano ever did, because he tries to do things for his community and tries to do things right by Tony and take care of Johnny Boy, that's Tony's dad's family, when he's away, and he really trying to give back to the community, and he tries to take care of visit his uncle who's in prison, and kind of like, I want to do a good deed. Like, he really has a lot of guilt and really wants to try and make up for the things that he's done, because he knows on some level that it's bad, right? But much like Tony, he has fits of rage, and he gives into his passions, where there's like a disconnect. Ironically, it's partially driven, at least first, by the right thing, because he falls in love with his father, this other gangster's mistress, we brought over from Italy, and much like apparently his mother, beforehand was beaten by his father, who also beat him, and he saw his father beating this young woman. He's like, I didn't like it when you hit my mom. You're not going to hit her again. He wants to protect this woman who he's kind of falling in love with. We might see some parallels with Tony again. His dad, basically they get into an argument, and he just, in rage, just, I guess, all this pent up rage bursts out, and he kills his dad, Ray Liotta. And it's like really brutal stuff, which, once again, context wise, we've seen Tony do similar things, but we never saw him murder a family member that brutally. So I'm like, okay, maybe sharper contrasts here. Okay. And then later on, he tries so hard to give this woman everything she wants, but she ends up getting frustrated because he's married, and she becomes his mistress on the side, another common mafia thing. But she ends up getting frustrated and at a certain point sleeping with his rival, his former partner, this gangster Harold, this African American gangster, um, and he eventually finds out about that after their competition and after a shootout, and that he just becomes so overcome by that betrayal that he just drowns her in the ocean. This really intense but well shot, like this beautiful but also kind of disturbing dark scene where he just murders this woman that he clearly loves so much because he becomes so overcome by that passion. And that's what happens. It's like he doesn't think straight in those moments. So, sharp contrast. I'm like, and then he does try to sort of save Tony by saying, what's the best thing I can do, when he talks to his uncle. Well, you're making these bad choices. Maybe the best thing you can do is just not be around Tony if he looks up to you. Don't be the example. But he tries to avoid it, and then he ends up getting killed, though we're not sure about by who at first, which is one of the mysteries of the show, is who really did kill Dickie Moltisanti, who is responsible. We think we find the killer. We might find out that's not true. But Dickie Moltisanti was a really interesting character, and I think he was meant to be very similar to Tony, and it's like the sharp contrast. Like, he meant to do good things, but ended up doing bad things, and how much that was his choices and his environment and both. And there's a lot of ideas there. But Dickie Moltisanti, who we focused on, uh, but we also get some insight into some other characters. I think the most important thing we do get, all right, well, also, I think the movie is a bit of a commentary, maybe along with what Dickie did, about mental illness, and how the show sort of explored mental illness, and how since then we have different ideas about it, and how over time mental illness has just kind of been pushed aside, or people didn't want to address it or didn't think it was a concern. And we see back in the 60s and 70s when this takes place, people still kind of felt that way. And we learn about a little more about Livia. I think Livia, we learn a bit more about, we see a bit more of Johnny Boy and Junior and some of the other old gangster characters. But I think Livia's probably got probably the most important scene for me in the whole movie, which I think makes the whole movie worthwhile if you are a Sopranos fan. And you might be saying, okay, this isn't exactly about Tony, but it is about his world and things that influenced him. But we do get some direct stuff that does correlate to what we saw in the series about him and his relationship with his mother and how significant that was and how she was cold and mean and very negative and had a lot of her own problems and eventually turned out to be sort of evil. All this resentment. She tries to help have Tony killed in the first season. So there is a lot of tension between the two of them. Talk about parental issues. But there's the scene where, after talking with the principal or guidance counselor, talking about how Tony has potential and he's smart and, he doesn't apply himself, even though he's got the grades. Livia has a heart, is kind of saying, sort of dismissing that, like, he's not that great. And I thought this was really interesting because we never got this in the show. We never saw any real love significantly that Livia had towards Tony the entire time, really. Nothing major, right? Sometimes with the grandkids, sometimes with other people briefly, but never really with Tony. And we're not entirely sure exactly if there was a specific reason for that. I think there might have been other issues going on there. But there's a scene after talking about that with the guidance counselor, and she's asking, what good memories did you have with your mother? Because Tony gave a different answer to Dr. Melfi in the show after the dad fell down the stairs, and that was a time I remember her being happy. And Dr. Melfi's like, "Okay, got anything better than that?" It was a pretty funny scene. Love Sopranos kind of dark humor. There's a lot of good laughing in that show. I realize I think I get more now. A lot of funny stuff, but this the best scene in the movie is when the kind of together is when the guidance counselor says, like, when you read this book to him as a kid, this child's book, and taught him certain words, and they were just kind of reading close together when he was little, and how that was like his best memory. His best memory as a kid was of being that close with his mom and her reading to him this book. And Livia actually is taken aback and clearly like sad about it. Like she actually like forgot about it or didn't think about it or like realized like at some point in there she really did love Tony, or maybe still does in a way. And I'm like, we never saw that in the show. And Livy is pretty much the most hated character. I mean, one of. I mean, you could, if you talk about actual villains in the show in a weird way, people probably say she's the worst, right? Complicated, but we don't see many redeeming qualities to Livia in the show. They say that, audience members say that, right? A very easy character to hate, but we say, okay, what's Livia's problem? And we still don't have a whole lot of insight into that, but we see that mental illness might be an issue as well, contributing to her problems. And there's lines about medication, dismissing it. And Tony even brings it up, like, I heard they have this, maybe it could help. And she doesn't want to, and kind of brings that up to his Uncle Dickie about it to see if he could get it to help it. And it's kind of teased that maybe this could have helped with some things addressing these problems through medication or therapy or whatever. But it never really, it's an old fashioned idea. It's the mafia. They don't really believe in that, essentially. And that's just kind of common reflection on the old values about mental illness and beliefs on it and how that's changed. But then there's the next scene where Livia is actually making some food for Anthony, and talking about maybe doing something with him. And they're talking about the show she wants to go see on Broadway. And she's actually happy to be around him for a little bit. They have this nice, warm connection, which we never saw on the show. And I was like, so there was something there. But then she misinterprets something, and then it's like it's gone. So it's like that added some nuance, and it was really quite sad. And I think that was a powerful moment. I think that scene was pretty much the best for the Tony stuff. Um, yeah, other than that, I mean, the cinematography and editing were really good in this. Just some of the action sequences and the shots of New York and on fire, and just the flow of it, the shots on the beach, the montages, the music. It was all crisp, very well done, much to the team of Sopranos typically did. So I definitely can say that. Another thing that's just kind of more of like Easter eggs and stuff is you get to see a lot of the other characters there and their little insights. Mostly, it's just younger actors doing impressions that are just really good. but I liked how clearly they studied it. Like, oh, the way Paulie kind of holds his hand, I'm like, okay, that's Paulie Walnuts there, and you've got Big Pussy Bombonceros was clearly there with his hair and the way he's kind of talking, and uh, and Silvio was really good with his yeah, when he walked with his arms, I'm like, yep, that's Silvio. So you've got a lot of these younger characters, and oh, another big thing, Junior Soprano. I like that actor. I'm blanking on him by the name, but the guy that got to play Junior Soprano had like some of this movie had a lot of some of the classic lines. Livia saying "poor you" and Junior cursing sometimes like he was frustrated, and we get some insight about how Junior kind of was always. We do see that yes, what we heard about Junior was true. He did care about Tony. He did love him. He was a secondary father, but Junior was always insecure as a gangster. Never felt he was respected as much, and he slips and falls, and people are making fun of him. And this is probably one of the biggest things in the movie that we we learn relating to what we heard in Sopranos. It's kind of confirmed. We finally find out who actually killed him, and it turns out that because Dicky Moltisanti was laughing at Junior when he fell on the steps when it was raining, he was so insecure about that slight that he had Dicky murdered right before he was actually going to reconnect with Tony and help him again, because and that was another heart wrenching scene. Actually, it was very tragic. So yeah, Junior killed him over some petty thing, which is also kind of like it wasn't some big epic or romanticized thing. No, he was killed just by some slight minor, minor, minor thing. For no, which is also kind of a theme that comes up in Sopranos a lot about how people can be killed without a lot of fanfare, which some shows do even worse now. So, but that quick brutality of it about how that's how it is in this mafia lifestyle. Like those ideals and that code, sometimes it doesn't really hold as much weight as they claim it does. So that was also very like to see how like this it's almost like a coda or a response, a meditation to complementary to Sopranos. Like there's a lot of the same stuff interwoven in there. It's as an artistic piece, the more I think about it, I was thinking it's pretty good, but the more I think about it, it actually is really good. And I thought I don't need to watch this again. I might watch it again at some point, maybe after I watch the series again. But yes, I think Junior was good. But another little thing too, I liked of all the other characters, we see young Carmela, and I think Jackie Aprile and maybe Tony B, Steve Buscemi's character. I think they might be in there as well. But oh yeah, two other things I wanted to say about other scenes. I think one other part I really liked. I don't know exactly of who all my favorite characters are in The Sopranos. It's a tough list, but I think of all the gangsters. I mean, Bobby's great, of course, but I think of all the gangster friends of Tony's in the upper ranks there. I think Silvio was always my favorite because one of the he is a gangster through and through, but he was the consigliere, so he tries to give the advice, the wisdom, and manage things not just in the business, but sometimes he's down to earth and seems to care about people on a people level. So and don't get me wrong, he's still is still a gangster too, and he killed spoilers he kills Adriana. So Silvio has like probably the one of the most intense murders in the show, but as far as gangsters go, he generally was extremely loyal to Tony and cared, and he has this great conversation right before Dickie gets killed with Dickie, and is like, I think Tony has something, and it's funny because these guys aren't educated and they aren't very good at expressing their feelings about things, but Silvio kind of tries, like when Dickie's feeling so kind of basically very bleak about everything after his he kills his girlfriend and everything, and he's upset about losing his relationship with Tony and his situation. He tries to express himself, and Silvio's like, I don't quite get what you're talking about, but I know you care about him, and I want to say that Tony could maybe go somewhere that's not in the mafia. And it's almost like I don't know exactly how we could do that. I don't know how I could help him, but maybe in some way, if you lead him, maybe we can actually help him to get him to lead a life that his father would be proud of, and maybe get away from this mafia lifestyle. It's kind of implied. It's this quiet scene that I thought was also really good, and I'm like, I really like that because I always really liked Silvio's character, and he's one of the more level-headed ones. And Paulie Walnuts is funnier, of course, but he could often be very selfish and insecure. So, I think Silvio got a really good scene there, which I was happy about. And also, probably one last thing I want to talk about in the movie. This is a longer video than I thought. Is Ray Liotta's in it, and they has this weird thing, and I think maybe it was a metaphor for something, but Ray Liotta plays Dicky Moltisanti's dad, who was not a very nice guy, who gets murdered, who actually has kind of a Jersey accent, and then after him getting killed by Dickie, in one of his ways to try to kind of make up for what he did, tries to connect with his other family, his uncle, his brother's dad, who looks exactly like him. It's Ray Liotta again, without a Jersey accent, really, for some reason. And it was kind of weird at first, and I wondered if it was a deliberate casting choice, why they did that, why they made him a twin. There's probably some symbolism they're going for there. And I thought, okay, this is weird, and I wasn't liking Ray Liotta at first, but actually the second brother, as him being Dickie's conscience and kind of talking to him a little bit about Buddhism, and he has also some really great lines. Actually, made my mom laughed, and it was. He's kind of saying like I try to do right, and it seems like I mess things up. Also, kind of almost like we might hear Tony say, he's like, "What am I doing?" He's like, you know, and the uncle, is kind of talking to him. He likes Miles Davis. He has some little advice. Talks a bit about Buddhism, which we see some of that philosophy kind of explored and the spirituality explored in The Sopranos. And he's like, you're kind of saying all these things and you're kind of praying and wishing, thinking you're going to get something for your good deeds. But you ever consider that maybe the things you're doing just aren't that good anyway, essentially? And he has this really funny line about that and he's like, maybe it's not exactly the best way to be. You ever think about that? And it's like maybe the best thing you could do for Tony is just to not be in his life. And it's like those are some great scenes. Like the scenes actually where he's conversing, they seem a little weird and almost dreamlike. And there is of course some dream stuff in there as well because it's Sopranos and they like to play with the mind. But I thought those scenes were good too. So Ray Liotta, at first I wasn't sure about the casting, but I really did like the scenes in the prison when he visited his uncle. I thought they were really insightful. Much like Sopranos, complicated. I think it was beautiful filmmaking. It's not quite what I wanted. I wanted a little more of Tony kind of getting started out, though I do like the scene with the ice cream where he and his friends steal the ice cream truck. They do this thing where he's probably working out his rage and beating up the ice cream guy. Not a good thing. But what does he do with the ice cream he steals? He gives it out to the kids for free. So we see the two sides of Tony there, really contrasting. So like I said, there's a lot of the Sopranos stuff there. I think to add on and explore the scenes with Livia are good. The scenes with his dad, actually, Johnny Boy Soprano, seeing how he favored Janice more, but not really giving Tony much of an impression. Like that also added a lot. Like it's just there. The more I think about it, like it is a very good movie, and I think it is definitely a complimentary piece to Sopranos. That if you love Sopranos, you're gonna have to watch it. But if you're not a fan of Sopranos, I'm gonna actually say I think you should watch the show first because there's some stuff you're just not going to quite appreciate as much. It's still a good movie without it. It is. It is a good movie without it, but there are some things that are going to be spoiled there right away, like the mystery of who killed Dickie Moltisanti, and probably even bigger, the fact that certain people die later on and they're murdered by certain people like later on. So, you know, of course, if you watch this video, you probably got these spoilers already. But as I said earlier on, if you're not really if you're not really sure about it, I'd say check out The Sopranos first, and if you like Sopranos, come back and watch this. But yeah, this video was much longer than I expected. But yes, those are my thoughts on The Many Saints of Newark. If you watched it, let me know what you think. I'm probably going to go back through and watch Sopranos more over the next couple months. Almost done with season one, so maybe I'll do some more Sopranos related videos. I was thinking about something for Columbus Day actually. So yeah, let me know what you think. I've been slowly working on this Full Metal Alchemist video that I've just been so busy with class. I haven't had a lot of time to really edit it, so I can just do a quick video where I talk like this. But I've got the editing for the audio I'm working on, so not sure when I'll get that up, but maybe some point within the next couple weeks. We shall see. But there will be some more movie reviews coming up this month. October's got a lot. We've got Venom, which I'm going to talk about in another video here shortly. I think I'm going to see Candyman eventually, that new Halloween movie, James Bond, and Dune. So this is really the month for me. Maybe there's something else I missed there. So if you've stuck around this long, thank you for watching the video. There'll be more stuff coming, maybe more consistently in a couple months. But even on my sort of hiatus here, I'm still doing some stuff. So I'm trying. I appreciate everything. Let me know what you thought about this movie and like, share, subscribe, stay magical, all that good stuff. Thank you.